What if the greatest threat to our mental health isn't trauma or genetics, but the very devices in our hands? Today on the Crackin Backs Podcast, we're joined by Matthew Mattera, a military veteran, suicide prevention advocate, and author of Hope, My Journey of Love, Loss, and Faith. He calls it the Great Rewiring, a silent systemic shift in how our brains are being hijacked by technology, dopamine, and digital overload. From birth of the iPhone to the rise of algorithmic addiction, we are pulling back the curtain on how our minds are being reshaped and how we can fight back. This isn't just a conversation. It is truly a wake-up call. Matt Mattera, man, the last time you were on, you stunned us with all sorts of great philosophy and understanding about mental health, and just to emphasize your history, which is unimaginable, losing 6 family members to suicide, and how that tragedy reshaped your life and ultimately led you to becoming a therapist, which is fantastic transition. But since then, something's been brewing in you, a bigger picture, an idea of what really is going on in our culture today, which affects millions, if not billions of people across the globe. And you brilliantly, actually, I will say that Dr. Terry alerted me to a saying that you have, the great rewiring, the great rewiring. I think that is a fantastic segue into what we're going to talk about today. So let's start here with what was that moment or series of moments that made you realize that mental health crisis wasn't just about trauma or diagnosis, but something much deeper that's happening to all of us?
Yeah, well, first off, it is great to see you guys again and reconnect and unpack these really deep topics here. So I appreciate the opportunity to once again rejoin you and Dr. Terry. And full disclosure, I'm not a mental health professional full time. I don't practice in that space, but I kind of like the way you put it. It's amateur therapy, and sharing the story of what my family and I have been through in that journey. So the Great Rewiring really came about as a result of a lot of the introspection after the loss of Elizabeth. As a matter of fact, next month, May 12th, would be 10 years since Elizabeth passed away, 10 years ago. And that has been an opportunity for my wife and I to really recap and regroup. And over these last several weeks, it's been really interesting. A lot of resurfacing of some tears and all of that, me holding her and she holding me and holding our family together as we think about what has transpired over the last 10 years. In that journey over these last 10 years, I leveraged a lot of my professional military experience. When I was active duty, I worked in the world of cognitive warfare. So cognitive warfare, that's psychological operations, that's information operations. We call it the battle of hearts and minds. And before warfare plays out in what we call the physical domain, kinetic operations where people are shooting at each other, where we're launching missiles, we're going in and we're taking territory and suppressing the enemy through active fire. The real warfare starts here first, through the battle of ideas and how the narratives are shaped and how perceptions are shaped. And as we know, we're living in a very supercharged time right now, ideologically supercharged, especially here in Western culture, and more specifically in the United States. And so in that journey of unpacking this, came across the concept of a great rewiring. I was looking back in 2019. I saw several articles that popped up. This is going back in 2019 before I wrote my first book. And I was wondering, why have the statistics just increased with mental health crisis, and specifically suicide and suicidal ideation, self-destruction, death, despair, hopelessness, etc. And 2 articles that popped up, one was from NPR and one was from Rolling Stone magazine, and both of them had almost the exact same headline. And it was essentially suicide on the rise amongst youth and young adults. We don't know why. And then I went into the body of the article. And both articles had this pinpoint time. They said over the last 15 or so years, since 2007. And then the article went on. So me being a problem solver, being a senior strategist in the military at the time, I said, well, there's the rub. There's the X factor. What happened in 2007 that has caused this dramatic increase? And what I found was a paradigm shift that I've come to term as the Great Rewiring. 2007 was that tipping point, and something was transpired in our culture, in our society, that up until that point, we didn't have this apparatus or this capability. And that's because the smartphone, was released in 2007. The iPhone became the first actionable, large mass deployed information power system that was able to basically turn on the fire hose for informational power and influence on the hearts and minds of society, with specific focus on how does it impacted developing minds, youth, and young adults. So it's the iPhone. It didn't just change communication; it outsourced cognition. It hijacked neurochemistry, and it launched the first mass experiment in digital dependency. So collectively, and everything that nests underneath that, came to term that as the Great Rewiring.
I think that's brilliant, and I want to emphasize how you had referred to it as an outsourcing. We've outsourced our thought process. I mean, unfortunately, even for myself, sometimes if I forget something, I don't depend on my memory. I just pull up the iPhone. So if you don't use it, you lose it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's in 2007. I didn't even realize that was when all that transition started to take place. So how have you seen this shift and in more detail reshape some of the way we actually think and experience the world around us?
Yeah, so great question. So if you think back during COVID, when a lot of students were placed in an isolation type of environment where they were doing virtual learning, to include even adults, we were operating in a virtual environment. And that triggered a cascade of negative effect, especially in our youth and young adults. What happens is the human mind, when it's engaged in an in-person type of encounter, whether if you and I were sitting at the table right now instead of doing this virtually, our mind understands this is a real-world engagement. And the parts of our brain that light up correspond to the understanding this is not a synthetic, this is not a manufacturer, this is an organic engagement. And so there's other parts of our brain that are activated to have situational awareness of what's going on around us. I'm looking at you, I'm having eye contact, vice versa, I'm reading visual cues. That's an in-person engagement versus on a screen. The parts of our brain that are activated are the same parts of the brain that have to interpret art, something that's synthetic, something that the same parts of our brain that have to read words and then synthesize that to have meaning. And so you look at the cascade effect of what that had on our youth, our young adults in that COVID environment. I watched it with my second daughter, who's now 17. And at the time, it had I don't want to say debilitating effect, but it had an erosive effect on her cognition and her mental health because she wasn't having that real world tangible engagement. What does it have to do with the Great Rewiring? The Great Rewiring introduced in our culture in 2007 the capability to interface with the world around us, not in an in-person engagement, but rather through these screens and filters that activated the parts of our brain that view the same way we view art, the same way we view reading, the same way we view anything that's symbolic versus real-world engagement. That's the first thing. The second thing is embedded in these smartphone devices, we have these social media platforms. So platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook are built around reward systems. They're modeled after reward systems, after the slot machine variable rewards. Each like, each comment, and each alert trains the brain to crave stimulation and external validation. And these platforms, they hijack the brain's dopamine loops, and it creates a dependence. And so algorithms, they then trigger emotional arousal, envy, just to keep you scrolling. And it's not a passive technology, it's psychological warfare optimized for engagement and well-being.
On a previous, we had a guest who was a functional neurologist, and he told us something that you were right on the cusp of bringing up. I mean, now, you obviously are sharing the visual stimulus, the likes, the images and all that. And you started to allude to the slot machine and its euphoria and dopamine response. But our functional neurologist had mentioned something really fascinating, and that is, if you notice, slot machines, the numbers and the symbols scroll upwards. That's right. And it's no mistake or accident that when we scroll, it goes upwards. Upward transitions or saccades of the eyes stimulate dopamine in the brain. That's right. Whereas reading a book or something online, your eyes are moving laterally, and that actually stimulates serotonin. So, and that's why we tend to fall asleep if we're reading something. But
reading a book, that's right.
So between all that, the mental, emotional, and the physical manifestations how do you can't beat that, you have to go cold turkey. Any suggestions on what somebody should do in a situation like that?
Yeah. So, well, first off, with the youth and young adults, you think about this for a second. These are informational power systems. These are systems that have been deployed to really intended for a mind that with a neuroplasticity is not so vulnerable. And neuroplasticity, basically, the old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? Because we have certain behaviors that get baked in through neural pathways. And again, full disclosure to the audience, I'm not a neuroscientist or behavioral health professional, but I did work from a weaponization perspective, from an understanding from a military power perspective, how the human mind and how these things can be mechanized and weaponized for good or for evil. And so for benevolent purposes or malevolent purposes. So in the case of neuroplasticity, and it goes to your point, adolescent brains are still wiring. They're still being programmed. They're still pliable. If you remember Play-Doh, I used to play with Play-Doh back when I was a kid, and you first take it out of the container, it's soft and pliable. You leave it out, eventually it dries up and the form stays. So likewise, the child adolescent mind are pliable. They're still forming their reward systems. And so social media alters that trajectory, and it pushes that validation-seeking behavior, attention fragility, and we have the introduction of anxiety disorders and so on and so forth. And to your point, the way the human mind is wired, even with the light that comes through your phone, the blue light, or the nanometers of the color spectrum, all that plays a part into the neurochemistry and the activity that's taking place in between, the 6 inches between your ears. And so, putting your phone down at night, putting it away, setting a hard break. Okay, I'm gonna disconnect from the digital domain. I want to engage in a real conversation with my wife and kids. The old-fashioned laying down with your kids before they go to bed, and let's do a bedtime story, turn the page. All those things that we take for granted that we consider old-fashioned are really, really homeopathic, organic type of mental health mechanisms that we can apply. And then understanding, okay, I'm not going to get into this doom scroll to 11 o'clock at night, swipe, swipe, swipe. Yeah. All these different controls, we have to understand that there's a reason why we've seen this cascade effect of cognitive decline, mental health decline in our culture. And it really starts, you can really pinpoint it, okay, 2007 is when this great rewiring took place in our culture now, where now this device has turned into this leash that is dictating us rather than us dictating it.
I liked how you use the term weaponized, because it's almost like these little devices have become, little weapons that anybody can use to get information into us, right? And I also look at, we're so concerned about our kids because our kids are so rewiring, and teens, and you can't see teens just walk around without, or even young adults, they always have their phones, and they'll be sitting around amongst their friends, and they're all looking at their phones instead of looking at their friends who are sitting right in front of them. But I'm also seeing something that's just as bad, and that's our age, parents. and you'll see these parents get so mad at their kids, and yet when you're talking to the kid, you look over and they're looking at their phones.
Mhm.
And so I've seen parents that their screen time is 12 hours and the kid is 6 hours, So, and now you're seeing grandparents stuck to their phones. So we know that neuroplasticity we still have neuroplasticity, even though our Play-Doh may be getting a little stiff, we can still learn stuff. So it's not just a kid thing, it's a full epidemic across the country. I'm guilty, Spencer's guilty, we're all guilty.
That's right.
And so what do you think about this weaponization, because that's just a great term, anytime we can make the negative sound better than the positive. What's your thoughts on these apps and algorithms, and do you see a solution for balance?
Well, I call it weaponizing, and that's deliberate. It's not just something that's from a familiar part of my lexicon of vocabulary because I'm a military background. But in my world before I retired, I understood, and my colleagues were very hyper aware that there are adversaries and actors out there that do not have our best interest in mind as an American society. And so they understand the reward system. They understand human psychology. They understand it far better than we do in a lot of ways. So there are state actors that see this not as a convenience, but as a primary weapon system to do this to introduce generational decline into the United States, into the American public, because from the American public comes the American defense aperture. In other words, as a country, we're an all-volunteer force. And so if we can intellectually and cognitively and emotionally and through the value system erode that stability, erode that foundation, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but the next generation will be in a weaker posture. Their cognitive immune system, so to speak, will be compromised and then vulnerable to any manner of adversarial type of activity. So, to your point about calling it a weapon system, it is our adversaries, our state actor adversaries, most assuredly see these technology systems as weapon systems. They don't see it as something just to be able to connect your bank online and be able to make life more convenient. Open you have your house, the Internet of Things, where your whole house is connected, and you can just through your app. We see that through the aperture of convenience. They see it through the aperture of cognitive influence. And it's top of mind to them. It's not an, oh, by the way, that is the primary means, because American society, any society, is founded on these pillars of influence. Pillars of influence include faith and family, economics, entertainment, civics, and so on. And so the American system has been the huge pillar of influence within the American system. Society has been the pillar of entertainment. And so we're the ones that invented fast food and introduced it to the rest of the world. And so our adversaries understand that, and they see this as cognitive fast food. They see this as the cognitive drive-through to introduce the fast food, if harkening back to that old, there's a movie that came out several years back called Super Size Me, where the gentleman ate McDonald's, right? Not to call out McDonald's, but ate McDonald's for like 30 days. He did his baseline on the front end, got his blood levels done, did a checkup with the doctor, and then everything was normal. And then 30 days later, he came back to the doctor, checked in, and his blood pressure was up, his sugars were up, everything was off the charts.
Yeah.
And so think of this as cognitive fast food, the informational diet. Food is to the body what information is to the mind. And so that has been something that again, our adversaries overseas, and internally, there's the opportunity. Well, I can make more money if I have an app that has I can monetize it, and so we're being attacked from the outside through these informational power systems, and then likewise we're exploiting and we're attacking ourselves with these informational power systems. So we're confronting this from two sides. And so to answer your question, what can people do? Well, one is awareness, understand, okay, how did we get here in the first place? Kind of doing a tactical pause, withdraw, and say, okay, wait a minute. Everybody, we all understand something has happened. We have, as a society, just gone down this great road of cognitive decline, mental health, resilience, relationships, so on and so forth. Why is that? And everybody knows, man, something changed. What is that? And I think We can pin it back to 2007, that great rewiring where we're as a society, to your point, Dr. Terry, it's not just the youth and young adults. I'm doing it. You're doing it. Our grandparents are doing it. We're all sipping from this fire hose of dopamine reward, getting lost in this echo chamber of informational power through a screen. And so, short answer, unplug. You got to unplug. You have to understand that this is something that is convenient, but we have to be the master of this versus the slave of this, and understand that this is something that is convenient. It is something that allows us to have greater connection if we manage it right. The irony that we call social media, yet has resulted in so much anti-social behavior. It's so clever to call it social media when it actually does the very opposite. Talk about a massive gaslighting. We call something that creates anti-social behavior, if used chronically, social media. And that's all part of the psyop. It's a massive psychological operation that's inundated our culture. So unplug. And when I say unplug, doesn't mean I'm not telling folks, hey, go to throw your phone in the dumpster and go buy a flip phone. What I'm saying is you have to have awareness and understand, okay, this is something that if I'm not careful with it, can become my master.
You know, Elon Musk, I heard him in a talk several years ago, and he was developing the Neuralink. And the interviewer was like, wait, you want to put a chip in someone's brain and so they can operate it. And originally he was doing it to bypass spinal cord injuries and diseases and get people walking again. And the interviewer was like shocked, going, wait, you're going to have a computer attached to you that can tell you what to do, what you do? And Elon kind of chuckled and he goes, you're already doing it. The difference is yours is it's already attached to you. You carry it around with you. It's in your pocket. You never leave without it. The only difference is now I free up your hand. And wow. when you start thinking about it, it's like everything that the Neuralink that the guy was afraid of was already happening. And the only thing that he wasn't focused on was the Neuralink can bypass the area of death of a spinal cord and reactivate and get people to walk again. He goes, Elon was focusing, he goes, well, you've already been taken over by a computer. I'm just trying to get people to walk again and not have muscular dystrophy and different diseases. I'm trying to fix the diseases. But what you're worried about, you're already doing it. You're already attached to a computer. That's right. So, we don't think about that. We think, oh my God, the implant is terrible. But you're already implanted. It's just on the external side. How do we unplug? Sounds easy, but they say it's harder to quit than smoking. What's some strategies you have?
So one is the awareness piece, and just to amplify that talking point you made about how we're attached is we have something more powerful than any television studio, any radio station, or any newspaper. If anybody reads newspapers anymore, right? All of that right here in this pocket-sized payload that we carry with us constantly. Wherever we go, it's plugged in. It's plugged into us cognitively, right? So when I was working my last job, it's kind of a way of answering your question here. So when I was working my last job on active duty, and then also as a defense contractor for a short season, where we worked at was a facility. It was a sensitive facility. The information inside of it had to be protected, could not be exposed to the outside. One of the control measures that were in place is everybody had to leave their smartphones either in their car or there were lockers outside the building. Let me really unpack that because I went fast here because the facility had such sensitive information, delicate, had to be protected. Hard control measures were put in place to say, hey, you can have your phone, but not in this space. You can have your social media, but not here, because what takes place here has to be protected and shielded from all of that. Imagine if we treated our mind and our pattern of life, our families, everything about us with that same compartmentalized and understand this is a sensitive facility. I have to protect what goes in it. I have to protect what I take out of it. I have to guard it, and I have to have real hard stops, visible hard stops. So sometimes to To do the unplug is you have to first off recognize, is there an issue? And this is the whole point of this conversation. Yeah, there's an issue. There's a massive societal issue right now that's cascaded across generations. Now that we recognize what the issue is, we kind of unpacked a little bit how we got here and how it works and why the issue is an issue. Now what do we do about it? Do we keep talking about it and return back to the cognitive cocaine? Or do we say, ooh, I need to put a hard stop. I need to be able to put a hard break. And that's where self-leadership is going to have to come in, and then from that self-leadership, that's going to have to exude out to if whether you're a single person and you're leading yourself, or you're a family person that you're a mother or father, a leader in a family, exerting that leadership outward into your family and potentially having to reset your digital pattern of life. And that means having boundaries. We talk about having boundaries all the time when it comes to relationships, right? If we have a friend or a family member that we love and care about dearly, but there's some things going on in their life that could potentially be toxic if we bleed into our lives if we're in too close proximity. Likewise, the relationship with this needs to be treated the same exact way. That it's useful, I enjoy it. It gives me an ease of maneuvering through my daily life for banking and connecting and all that stuff, right? I can make phone calls with it. I can take pictures real time and capture moments. But I have to understand that if I let this thing enmesh with me and become so close where it's now dominant, because it can exert dominance and can inflict itself upon us very easily if we're not always top of mind, understanding that this thing is powerful if we don't have those hard boundaries. So cutting that off really comes down to self-leadership, awareness, and then self-leadership. Like, okay, now that I know, what am I going to do about it? And that's having hard boundaries and hard breaks. Like, okay, putting this away. And whether that's at dinner, not having phones at the dinner table. I mean, we all talk about it, but do we actually do it? And we talk about it because we think to ourselves, well, it's rude to be on your phone while you're at the dinner table. This goes beyond just good etiquette. This has to do with our mental health and the cascade effect it's had on our culture, youth and young and old alike. And so putting the phone away at the dinner table, putting the phone away before bedtime, reconnecting organically, having real person-to-person engagement, understanding that social media may say social, but it's social in name only because it has a propensity to dominate, because it activates those same dopamine loops that a drug addiction would activate, or the same dopamine loops and trigger mechanisms that the social media activates. Now, what I'm not saying get off of social media. I have to use it. You guys have to use it because it's a good opportunity for marketing and raising awareness and sharing information and broadcast as an information radiator. But at the same time, we have to be very cognizant and aware and have that self-awareness. Be like, all right, I'm finding myself, wait a minute, I'm spending too much time on this. Or more importantly, as I'm reading this, what are the things that I'm feeling? Is it soliciting positive feelings about myself, or am I finding myself now becoming enamored with another person's life? And I'm looking at them like, man, they have it better than I do. Because on social media, fact of the matter is, all these influencers on social media, whether they're doing a makeup tutorial or they're doing a tutorial about their new car that they've got, or whatever the case may be, they're giving you a 15 to 20 second snapshot of a curated, perfected portion of their life. And so those are all those different things that we have to get a lot smarter about this. In order to become the master of it, we have to realize, hey, wait a minute, we've adopted this with fast and furious enthusiasm, without understanding, hey, wait a minute, where are the seatbelts? Where's the speed limit sign? This is great. This is cool that we have smartphones and social media, but it's become our master rather than becoming a tool.
Wait, Spence, I got one more thing to add on that.
Sure.
A lot of time we hear, both from adults and kids, I'm bored. You see people when they're on the train or at the airport or sitting around, and they do it because they're bored. When we all grew up, we didn't have it, so we had to find other ways to occupy our brain. What's some strategies that you have as a strategist, as a military intelligence officer, to help combat this and give parents, give kids something they can grab onto when they're bored, that they can try and break this, unplug and help because this is all about mental health. And if we're bored, we're going to be bored 23 hours out of 24, because
right.
we got nothing else going on. So can you give me some practical strategies that somebody can do, including myself, that to help break this barrier, not running to my phone to see if I got an email or a text, or if somebody wants to buy something on Marketplace, something. Can you give us some strategies that we can just do to help unplug?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you an anecdote from my personal life. So my son is 7 years old, and he's at that prime age where they are digital natives now at this point. They were born into it. You and I remember when the first cell phone came about, and it was like this big with a briefcase and like a long antenna.
I still have it.
Right. I remember seeing TV. All the rich people had them, right?
Right.
But this generation now is digital native. So talk about the anecdote. So my son, digital native, grew up with this stuff, and he likes to use his mom's tablet. My wife Erica, she's got a tablet, got the big Apple tablet, thing's huge, and he likes to play his games, right? And he plays like army games on it, plays Tetris, all this cool stuff. All fine and dandy, but what I notice is if he's engaging with these through it, and it's all through a screen, it's all flat screen, he's moving these images around to accomplish an objective. And I found that when he's on that for too long, his attention span to real world tactical engagement and tasks end up becoming deteriorated. And so it would cascade into school. I was like, teacher, hey, your son, he's kind of drifting off a little bit. We have these things. We have something tangible, crayon, pencil. I have to take this tactile object, put it in another tactile object, tangible, and then accomplish a task, not on a screen, but actually physically make a mark or whatever the case, move the block from point A to point B. So what I did was I said, here's what we do. I leveraged that, that cognitive warfare piece that I did for 23 years. And you know what? This is I'm gonna scale a tactic from the battlefield, and I'll scale that tactic down to my family. You know what I did? And it's gonna sound really silly and over simple. I bought him a box of Legos. I said, let's do this. Let's build this together. Let's put it. The kid's obsessed with Legos now. What did he want for Christmas? He didn't want electronic. Didn't want it. Said, hey, Dad, I want this Lego, this Lego, this Lego. He's big into Star Wars Legos right now, right? And so he's building them. His sister, who's 17, she's into it, and she's building them. Christmas morning, I think I bought him one video game for Christmas morning. He didn't play that thing until like 3 days later because he was so into the building the Legos. So to kind of a long way of answering your question, we have to get back to tactile engagement, real world, physical. My fingers have to touch a physical object, move it from point A to point B, and build something or accomplish something. And the same thing goes to what Dr. Barron was talking about. A book, right? Bring a book in the plane. Get back to these old school habits that we had before this great rewiring took place. All those things, let's resurrect those. Let's bring those back. Let's get back to playing outside. Go and get some sunshine. Go get some vitamin D. It's good for your cognitive domain. It's good for your mental health. Draw some pictures with your kids. Get your kids some coloring books. Get them some Legos. Take them outside and go for a walk. Real world type of stuff that is going to rewire the rewiring. So the nice thing about the cool thing about rewiring is that tells you, I can rewire it back to default. I can always go back and put it back to the default operating system that our creator imbued in us. But it's a matter of us seizing the initiative, recognize that there's an issue. How did we get here? Why is it happening? And now I know how to return back to default cognitive health, tools and mechanisms I can utilize to ensure that I always maintain that good, positive default baseline.
Well, I think you'll be happy to know that, and this is probably one of the more overlooked and elementary perspectives, but I just read this morning that they're going to have a mandatory education back to learning how to write cursive penmanship.
Wow.
I did not realize that was the lost art. They don't even teach that in school. They don't teach cursive writing in school anymore. Wow. Well, at least in Florida, that is actually been proposed and is going to be mandated. Something as simple as cursive penmanship, you know. So I want to ask you about, this young generation's understanding of reality and truth. And I will say that fortunately, my Instagram, the algorithm has provided me with two very special things, which I know we've been talking about all the negative aspects, but then there's the, my algorithm brings up a lot of funny things that I want to look at, that I'll look at before bed. So I laugh before I go to bed. Secondly is true educational things that I can implement into a relationship with patients, relationship with significant others, family. And those are really good. But how does one discern reality from truth, especially in this generation where you hear things that I'll hear something from one of my patients. I go, do you actually believe that? That kind of thing.
Yeah. There's there's disinformation and misinformation. And disinformation is something that is a word that's relatively new to our modern lexicon. Yeah. Disinformation comes from a Soviet word, a Russian word, disinformancia, and I may not be pronouncing that correctly, but it was coined by the infamous Joseph Stalin, and he coined that as a way to try to take information that seemingly disparate points, that putting together to make a new narrative in order to malevolently steer the target audience. Another way to put that is this: a fraud is a lie. A fraud is a lie wearing the skin of the truth. And so when we hear the term, especially in our modern information environment today, we have the 24-hour news cycle. We have more 24-hour news outlets than hair on your head. And we have the social media, which is just a more powerful, even more popular way of people getting what they consider news. And so as a result, we have these two words, disinformation and misinformation. Misinformation would be, it is not necessarily a nefarious intent behind it. I just told you, hey, be here at 11, and when I really meant 12, and we mixed up our times. I'm misinformed. There's not necessarily something that I'm trying to intentionally steer you and target you to move you away from a desired effect. Versus disinformation is very intentional, strategically, surgically precise, bits and pieces. It is the fraud, which is a lie wearing the skin of the truth. What does it have to do with the actual truth? So in our modern information environment today, we're digitally connected. We have this fire hose of information just coming at us all the time through some type of screen, whether it's a screen on the wall or the screen in our hand. And we put on the label of news. News triggers this logos part of us. There's pathos, ethos, and largos. Pathos meaning empathy, emotional sense, right? That's the funny puppy videos, right? Or you see the videos during the holiday season where you have the local animal shelter putting up all the animals and pictures of the animals looking sorry in their cages, and it say, hey, please donate now. It's triggering that emotional side of it, right? There's that ethos piece of it. There's your logos, which is logic, right? So doctor in a white coat telling you, hey, take this 3 times a day, you're going to feel better. You trust it because, well, there's a guy, he's wearing a doctor's lab coat. It triggers that. And pathos is that connection where, point A, B, C. And so I think that when it comes to the truth, we hear this a lot. Well, this is my truth. I feel this way about that. We're confusing truth, objective reality versus how I feel about something. And that has become a coined phrase. Well, my truth tells me that X, Y, and Z. That's a subconscious way of an individual, rather than reconcile with reality, they'd rather curate themselves into an echo chamber of what makes them feel good, because they haven't, that they've either been, their informational diet has become so polluted with so much informational toxins, the misinformation, the disinformation, what we see in our screens 24/7, that they really end up putting more gravity and more value on what they feel about something rather than with the reality of something. And there is objective truth. If I jump off a building that's 40 feet tall, the law of gravity is not going to feel that I could feel like I can fly all day. Law of gravity is going to reconcile me pretty fast that no, you can't fly. no matter what your personal truth may tell you. There's truth, objective truth, and there's just what you feel about something. And unfortunately, because of this great rewiring, because it leverages that dopamine emotional aspect of it, it curates that, it feeds that part of our human experience so much that then now we put so much gravity around how we feel about something, my truth versus objective reality. And that's going to be that's another reason 125 why to institute the great unplugging and the great rewiring of the rewiring.
Matt, based on your military experience, I think you'll be able to understand that the fascination with some of these games, the Grand Theft Auto and things like that, and the other aggressive military games, where killing someone and coming back to life, or being killed or shot at and coming back to life, is probably one of the most critically negative reinforcements that I'm wondering. I mean, based on your history in the military, and you become somewhat desensitized to someone's life. Are we seeing that? I mean, do people realize how detrimental those games are becoming?
That's a powerful question, Dr. Barron, and it's funny you mention that, because about 2 days ago I was on my phone. And I saw her. So if you go on Instagram or any social media platform, there'll be ads from time to time, right? And I have some games on my phone that I'll play either just to occupy a little bit of time between reading or doing whatever. And so this ad came up, and it was an ad for a game where you could download it and you could be an actor in the game that is basically, for all intents and purposes, engaging in lawless behavior, looting, rioting, whatever the case may be, and so you're the protagonist is the lawless one, and the antagonist is the law enforcement. So I could see the little character on the screen that was demoing it, right? And it's the guy's got a face mask on, got a hoodie on, got a backpack on. He's going after law enforcement. There's a set of squad cars, and he's shooting the squad cars. And him and his little group could go in and pillage different local businesses, right? And I'm not the target audience for this stuff, but when I saw that come up on my screen, my alarms are going off in my cognitive warfare space, being a cognitive warfare professional about culture. Because remember, cognitive warfare, the target audience, number one, is the individuals. Individuals make up families. Families make up communities. Communities make up countries, right? And countries are collectively is a culture or society. And so to answer your question shortly, is that there is nothing healthy or beneficial about anything that glorifies and glamorizes behaviors that are gratuitous violence, that are lawless behavior, that are antisocial behavior. And what we've seen through this modern digital age, through the video game platforms, through the social media platforms, etc., that we have come to look at this lawless behavior and almost glamorize that as Robin Hood. We put a Robin Hood type of, those are the good guys, and law and order, those are the bad guys. Cultural norms and structure and discipline, that's the bad. We need to be reckless and wild and inflict lawlessness and reckless behavior around the rest of society, because I'm going to do what works best for me, right? And so it appeals to that base desire of selfishness. It appeals to that base desire of greed and materialism, all these different things. And I think that I'll tell you what, Grand Theft Auto. When I was a kid, when I was younger, I remember seeing folks play. I'd be like, that is terrible. That was a horrible thing. To me, it's just as bad as the music platforms, music that we hear that glorifies drug abuse, yes, alcoholism, sexual promiscuity, materialism, and then we wonder why we have all this garbage in our culture right now, because our information environment, this all ties to informational diet. Our informational diet in Western culture, since the advent of radio, music, television, now social media and smartphones, all of that's the information environment. Food is to the body what information is to the mind, and collectively, our informational diet, we've been pulling up to the trough of all the stuff that we should not be doing. Everything that that causes a society to crumble is inside that trough, and we've been pulling up to that trough and just eating it, and then we wonder why we're having so many issues in our culture. That stuff is terrible. I'm in violent agreement with you that's the last thing anybody should be engaging in.
Matt, I think, you gave me goosebumps. The irony, you brought up what I was, leading to, the irony behind how much protest there is against, I mean, I hate to pick on rap music, but that is probably one of the genres that is most filled with the decadence, the drugging, the domestic violence, the killing of cops, on and on. And I got to tell you, some of that music has great beat. It fires me up. I'm listening to it in the gym. I'm singing the words, not realizing I'm on autopilot. I go,
that's right.
What the hell am I singing? I'm talking about you can't help but you're getting brainwashed.
You are. And we the power of the human mind is, there's values. Here's an axiom, part of a cognitive warfare axiom that I utilize in my work. Values plus belief multiplied by attitudes equal behavior. In other words, so your values are the base layer. Yeah. Your values of family, life, sanctity of life. Another human being is precious and special, created in the image of God. Not to get all preachy, but that's what my faith value tells me. But human beings are special and sacred. Values of I'm going to steward what I've been entrusted with. Meaning, this is my house. I'm going to cut the grass. Those are values, right? Work value, ethics, values. That's the base layer. Then what we believe, right? So our belief, because I value this, now I believe it, and it is baked into me. It is part of my persona. It's going to be my true north that I navigate towards. Then all of that's in here, and then once the veil between here and here, meaning the internal, the cognitive domain, and the physical domain, that's the desk I'm touching, that's the microphone in front of me, that's all the physical domain. The veil, the barrier between the cognitive domain, which is invisible, you can't touch the cognitive domain. You can touch the brain, it's about 3 pounds, 6 inches between your ears. But what I can't touch is an idea. I can't touch a belief system. I can't touch a thought system. That's invisible. Some people call that the spiritual domain. Some people, but in military parlance, that's called the cognitive domain. The physical domain I can touch. The veil between the cognitive and the physical is so thin, and where it gets thin is now your attitudes. Your attitude, and how many times you've seen it before. You can almost read somebody's body language, and you probably heard this before. Man, don't give me an attitude. They haven't even said anything. They just roll their eyes, their posture changes, their deportment changes. Still internal, but now it's bleeding into the physical domain, and that is behaviors. So values plus beliefs multiplied by attitudes equal behaviors, your pattern of life. So as a man thinketh, so is he. There's a scripture right there. As a person is positioned here, right? When I say thinking, I'm not talking a fleeting thought that flies over your head. I'm talking about the thoughts that fly over your head and you let them land and make a nest. Those, as you think, as your pattern of thinking is, so your pattern of life will be. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but over time, it'll have propensity and cascade into your life. So everything that we see that's man-made, the microphone, the computer we're talking on, first started out as an idea or a series of ideas in this invisible place, the cognitive domain. Those individuals that invented these things then went from here, then sketched it out and drew it into the physical domain. They manifested it. Now it's something physical. It hasn't been built yet, but now it's actually something I can see with I can engage with one or more of my 5 tactile senses. Now I build it. And so now it's actually built out. So the house I'm in first started out as an idea, got sketched as a blueprint, manifested as in the physical domain. And then from there, it actually got built. Patterns of life were established in order to support the building of what first started here. That makes sense what I'm saying?
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah. Very. I'm so glad you mentioned it.
This is truly where the battle for life truly starts at, right here, those 6 inches between your ears. Regardless of what your faith value system is, or maybe your audience, they may be completely agnostic or atheist. One cannot debate, though, that the human mind, our reality around us, is not first shaped by reality. It's what we perceive, but it's first shaped by here. Everything that's man-made first started out here in the mind. And we have to assume primacy once again into the 6 inches between our ears, and we have to be the authority of that, not not life around us, and certainly not this. And I'll say one more thing, that so we talked about values plus beliefs multiplied by attitudes equal behavior. So those values, beliefs, and attitudes, where does that all take place at? That all takes place the 6 inches between your ears, that cognitive domain. How do we shape the cognitive domain? If we know that the physical reality around us, the microphone, the monitor, my pattern of life, how I engage with family, how I handle conflict, whatever the case may be, how do we shape this first? Because if everything external to me is a manifestation of what's going on here, well, what shapes this? Information. The cognitive domain is shaped by the inputs of everything we take in through one or more of our 5 tactile senses. When we're driving down the street and we see a set of red and blue lights behind us, that triggers an autonomic response, right? Because we're conditioned to understand that those red and blue lights are not just red and blue lights, because I don't get scared by red and blue lights on my Christmas tree, because I associate a value to it, okay? It's the information that's associated with it, because what does those red and blue lights represent? Those red and blue lights represent law enforcement and so on and so forth, right? And so information, that's everything we take in through our one or more of our 5 tactile senses. The 2 most powerful of all the 5 senses are the eyes and then the ears, the things you see, the things you hear, and then your sense of smell, then your sense of taste, then your sense of touch. And that's why children, while still in utero, while babies are still in their mother's womb, there's been more books written about it than I can count. And we know, what to expect when you're expecting, books for new moms, right? I remember my wife, and in that book talked about at a certain point, babies in their mother's womb, the first of your 5 senses that come online is the sense of hearing.
Yes.
At 8 months in the mother's womb, our sense of hearing comes online. And so that's why I remember when I took my wife to go watch the movie Rambo, the latest, not the latest Rambo, but the Rambo, one of the Rambo movies. Yeah, right. Cool movie. Total guy movie. My wife went. It was my birthday. It was back in, I guess, it was in 2008. It was a couple months before Isabella was born. Erica was 8 months pregnant, where babies do. So it's in March, February, March of 2008. I say, hey, let's go to the movie. It was my birthday in April, so she takes me. We go to the movie theater. What do you want to do, baby, for your birthday? Well, I want to watch Rambo, right? Go watch Rambo. Coolest movie. And Erica, in the scenes with all the explosions, said, she took my hand and put it on her belly. She goes, feel that. And Isabella was kicking. Every time there was a loud noise or a boom, the baby would kick, right? Cool story, but it drives home the point that our information environment is what shapes us. And that information environment, what we're taking in. When I watched my father when I was a little kid, I told in the last podcast how I saw behaviors with my dad: alcoholism, physical abuse, drug addiction. I'm watching. That's my information environment. I'm a little kid, and our 5 senses are scraping constantly. I'm observing this behavior. I'm hearing the arguments. That ends up having a remaps neural pathways, and then we end up having, people have PTSD, anxiety disorders, you name it. Again, I'm not a mental health professional, but I've walked this road enough to start connecting the dots with that, especially from a weaponizing perspective. Yeah. Kind of a long rant there, but hopefully it kind of puts a pin on what you're talking about.
Well, I want to add something to that. You talked about the eyes and the ears, right? Mm-hmm. Yet when we see now people, and I've seen it lately, probably in the last 2 or 3 years, getting worse. I don't see anybody. Very rarely do you see somebody walking without headphones on or something, their earbuds. People are either looking at their phone or they're walking around and they got headphones on or earbuds and listening. We don't know if they're listening to music, what they're listening to. Mm-hmm. But we're constantly plugged into something. They can't just be unplugged. So what's your thoughts on the headphones?
Well, I think that what we listen to becomes a soundtrack for our life. Mm-hmm. And so if you watch a movie, I'm a big action movie guy. And so take a movie like Gladiator or Braveheart, any one of the battle scenes, right? And in the battle scenes, there's always this crescendo and amp up of music. There's take a movie like Terminator. There's all that, right? Now let's for a second take the soundtrack out of it, and it's just the scene, right? Does it have the same effect? No, it amplifies what we're already seeing. 2, if I was to take that soundtrack out and replace it with, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, it would be, you'd have this dissonance. It's like what I'm seeing real time, this violent action scene on Saving Private Ryan is not reconciling with what I'm hearing in the ears. Hearing acts as a force multiplier to the things we take in through the stimuli we take in through our eyes. And I think that the things that we are constantly plugged into here through our headphones, it acts as a soundtrack to whether it's what we're listening to in the car, what we're listening at home. But when we have it right here, now we're isolated. These act as an isolation device. We tune out the rest of the world around us, and now it's hyper focused on whatever that soundtrack is. And subconsciously, it most certainly becomes a soundtrack to a person's pattern of life. Look at the enduring themes and messages that are within certain genres of music, and then look at the target audience for that music, and then look at the outward pattern of life demonstrated by that target audience. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that the stuff that they're listening to is acting as a soundtrack to reinforce and normalize patterns of behavior that are resulting in the very, very system of decay that they're so trying hard to escape from.
It's so interesting you mentioned soundtracks, because there's a movie out right now called Warfare, and I don't know if you've seen it. And Warfare is a story, well, not really a story, but happened in Iraq, and it was one of the, to paraphrase it, a guy who survived an ambush. He doesn't remember it, and his buddy recreated it perfectly down to everything on the wall is exact. And the only reason I know is I have an actor friend who knows the director. Well, the one thing about this movie that's unique, there's no soundtrack.
Interesting. And
when you watch it, you don't realize how much more real it feels until afterwards the kid we watch it with, because you realize there's no soundtrack, and you're like, oh my God, how much different it made. So It's interesting you mentioned soundtracks.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt, before I delve into surveillance and privacy and autonomy, I want to have a confession, and that is my favorite movie was 300, which is which is a
soundtrack.
Yeah. I could watch that movie, and I feel like I could go run 100 miles after.
Oh yeah.
Not kill anybody, just run 100 miles.
That's a badass movie. Pardon me for saying that.
Badass movie.
So it made Gladiator look like a walk in the park, but I like that. I love that too. Yeah. But so another irony that we're experiencing in modern era here is that apps that we feel most connected are also watching us very closely. Mm-hmm. In your history, especially in military intelligence and things like that, how do we manage that, and what is it doing to our psyche to know that even though we're sacrificing our privacy and our autonomy and we're being watched? Please comment on something like that.
Yeah, so these platforms that we have on our phones, these social media platforms, it might not be a social media platform. It could be something like Google Maps, right? These are all built by people a lot smarter than you and I. They leverage human behavior professionals. That's all they do all day, every day is how does the human? We're like a bunch of lab rats to them. They're very fascinated by how they can better, more perfectly, hate to use that word, more efficiently is a better way to say it, exploit our vulnerabilities and proclivities as human beings. And that's what they do all day long. And these are high value, high dollar folks with a lot of letters after the name, hired by these companies, these tech companies. That being said, so understand, number one, you're not getting an app from Bob the builder down the street that decided to make an app. No, this is a big company that hires very heavy intellectual heavyweights that know how to get in your head. Number one. Number two, some of these platforms are actually, remember we talked about weapon systems and nefarious actors that are nefarious state actors in countries not ours. Some of these platforms are developed by those nefarious actors that are looking to target the American culture as a whole. So when they see the cognitive decline and the behavioral decline in our youth and young adults, when they hear about even grandma and grandpa being more on their phone than engaged with the grandkids, to them it's a win, because they're playing 4-dimensional 100-year chess to decline our posture as the great superpower, as the great influence of the world. Okay. So what does that mean? Inside of these platforms, embedded inside of these social media, or any app that we download, and we're all guilty of it. We download an app and there's the accept terms and conditions, right? We bypass the terms and conditions because it's like you need a microscope to read it, and it takes like 3 days. It reads bigger than the Declaration of Independence. It's just like, yeah, whatever. I'm just going to download it. What you're agreeing to is having access to your pattern of life with your photographs, if it's a social media, right? So we all post up photos on our Instagram. We've shared some pictures on Instagram. I posted something up. I was on a date the other day and with my wife and got a like, right? So but we have to grant access to that. And so we have to be more mindful of the controls that the app has and be masters of our phone, go into the settings, say, I do not want the phone to track this. I do not want my phone to track where I'm going. Because how many times, if you open your phone wide up and have it just as the Wild West, you could be driving down the street, and if you were searching for, let's say for me, I'm a car guy, and I was looking at something about truck parks like a month ago, and I drove by an auto part place, and I just happened to open my social media, not my social media, but my web browser, and sure enough, it's like, hey, if you're looking for a discount, there's a place right here. It's like, I just drove by that place. That's all geofencing. There's massive layers of metadata that are baked into this. Again, people a lot smarter than you and I spend all day long developing these apps, how to exploit human information, how to exploit human proclivity. And part of our proclivity is the consumerism that we have. And it's all about either one, making a buck, or two, if it's an overseas actor, eroding and exerting malign influence and destabilization into our American culture. So we're getting it from two fronts. We're getting it from the domestic commercial side, and we're getting it from the overseas bad actor side. And at the end of the day, guess whose phone it is? It's your phone. It's my phone. They don't own it. I'm going to set the parameters on it. I'm going to choose when to get on it, when to get off. I'm going to go into my settings, and I'm going to lock this thing down. But it's all about having the due diligence and awareness, and conversations like that, like Doug, we're having right now. Hopefully the audience listens to this, like, you know what? I need to check my settings on my phone. I need to really think about, my kid's been on the phone a lot. Let me dial this back a little bit and reassert my rightful role as governor and leader of not just myself, but my family.
Actually, I got to mention I can't say it's a patient of mine, and I can't mention too much about him because he's in a very high level of security for like cybersecurity and online intelligence and things like that for a very, very, very big company. And we were having this conversation the other day, and for those who are listening that enjoy running distances, and there is an app called Map My Run that if I started thinking after I started using it years ago, if somebody wanted to kill me, they'd know exactly where I'm at any given time of the day. He told me that app is barred from the military because people can easily find where you're at.
Yeah, that app was being utilized by some folks in uniform overseas some time back, and they were utilizing it at a particular base just for their normal runs, right? And they were using it to track their run, to track their progress.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, from an operational security perspective, it actually showed the location of the globe where they were at. Yeah. And if there's bad actors out there that are not. They don't see social media as just something to make you go buy more cheeseburgers or go buy a new pair of sneakers. They see this as an opportunity to find out, to not only exploit the cognitive security of American society as a whole, which is what they're doing, but they also see it as an opportunity to exploit the physical and national security as well. Because national security and physical security come under cognitive security. If our cognitive security space is good and our hyper awareness, and we understand our doors are locked, the doors of our mind are locked, our eyes are locked, our ears are locked, we're very mindful of what comes in, what goes out. Likewise, that's going to cascade into, remember, everything starts here first and then come the behaviors. We got to get this cognitive domain right first to master this. Then everything else falls in line with our pattern of life, to include things like using an app like that. But you're absolutely right. It was something that the military some time ago said, hey, guys, no more using this, because guess what? We saw you took a run. Glad you went for a run. Glad you got your exercise. But you did it on a base at a sensitive location, and people aren't even supposed to know we're here in the first place.
Right. In the beginning, you don't question it until you start to see a pattern.
Yeah.
one last thing before we enter our rapid fire questions that, if you recall, was a little exciting for you. What can we do, to reclaim that? You did mention a couple things to reclaim our minds, back and take charge. But, whether individuals, parents, educators, or just a whole society, what can we do to undo some of the damage that technology we've been encumbered with technology?
Yeah, great question. So think about 2007, great rewiring. That's when it really first started, right? So let's think back. What was life before 2007? Let's think back. What was our pattern of life before when it came to personal engagement with our family, things we did before to entertain ourselves? To Dr. Terry's point, he said, hey, what are some things we can do? Let's think back. Let's go back to pre-2007, 2006, 5, 4, all the way back. Everything that we did back then to stay connected, to stay balanced, to stay focused, to be able to have good and I'm not saying mental health was perfect before then. We've always had these challenges. It has just since spiked since 2007. So let's go back pre-circa 2007 and pull those things up. Take out for example, what I did. You know what? Let's buy some Legos. Let's go do those things. Let's go for a walk. Let's go to the gym. Let's go exercise. Let's have real engagement, real encounters. Put the phone away. We didn't have cell phones at the dinner table before 2007. Let's go back to that. It's pretty easy. If you think about it, the steps are the answer is right in front of our face. The hard part is cutting that addiction. Because I tell you what, when you start doing this, that dopamine hit is going to want to come, and you're just like, well, I need to check my phone just one more time. That's the addiction, man. It's the same thing. I just need to take one more hit, just one more hit, and I'll be good. Then I'll stop. You got it. Pornography does the same thing. It's all this stuff. You just gotta nope, put it away. Don't want this. Is this mastering me, or am I a master of it?
Nice. I am glad you made that metaphor of almost, to the, not just pornography, but like a drug, a real, hardcore drug. Let me do one more, whatever it is. And that's what our little phone is doing that to us.
It is, because it's playing with the same neurocenters that pornography plays with. Pornography is terrible. Drugs are terrible. And if you're not careful, your smartphone, as benign as it seems, it plays with those same centers. And oh, by the way, people a lot smarter than you and I know that, and they've engineered it as such. So now that we know that, now that we're aware, okay, we've been getting played, now it's time to reassert our dominance on the battlefield and be like, nope, not anymore. I'm done being a chump for somebody else. I'm going to go,
I love it. I love that you're putting it that way. You're making it seem like you could liberate yourself, and that is the challenge for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, we're going to go into the rapid fire questions, of which I love. The answers need to be brief, but we always get caught up in, So question number 1, are you ready, Matt?
Let's go for it.
All right, my man. As a former naval officer, what's one captain's orders you give yourself to stay mentally shipshape?
Once captain, oh, wow. Stay guarded, stay vigilant. Stay guarded, stay vigilant.
Very good. Number 2, what's your favorite? Now, when I refer to junk food, I'm referring to informational diet that you can't quit.
I have turned into an AI geek. I just love playing with it. It's really interesting how, I almost test it to see how smart is this thing really, right? And I understand kind of behind the scenes what's going on, but I like to try to see if I can break it.
Nice. I know. I have to say that there's times I've used it and been very vague about something, and I feel like it's in my head. It's in my brain, putting words out that I go, whoa, that was pretty close.
Well, people smarter than you and I have done it for a reason, right?
Right.
It's part of the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Question number 3. Now, be honest. Have you ever pretended your phone died just to sneak a little peace and quiet?
Yeah, I have. Or yes, I have, but one even worse. Oh, this is guilty. I've said if I know I'm going to have an engagement, like a conversation, and it's like, oh, this person's, this is not going to be fun. I'll send an alarm about 10 minutes in to mimic my ringtone, and I'll be like, oh, hold on one second, let me take this call. That's terrible. That's a psyop game. I'm psyoping people.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Full disclosure to my friends and family, I haven't done it to y'all, but there's been some folks out there that over the years I've had to like, oh, I got to take this call.
Oh, exactly right. I'll actually preemptively have a friend of mine or my mom or my bro call me. Just call me at 5010 or something like,
Right. Same concept.
Yeah. All right. Question number 4. What's a quirky self-care ritual you secretly love when you need a mood boost?
I go shave.
What?
Since I shave, unless I was deployed in certain locations, I didn't have to shave. But most of the time, if I was in garrison, at headquarters, obviously we're shaved, clean cut. Yeah. When I retired, I just decided, let me grow it out. And I do it for myself because it's going to sound crazy. I know my wife likes me clean shaven. So I know, like, if I'm clean shaven, that's kind of her love language.
Yeah.
So I'll get more snuggles that way.
Nice.
I get it. I totally get it. All right, question. Sorry, I had to laugh because I could totally relate to that.
Yeah.
Way. Question number 5. If your life had a theme song, and in your life, what would that be?
There's a song from the movie The Last Samurai. It's part of the soundtrack, and one of my favorite movies. I identify very closely with Captain Algren, who played by Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Yeah.
And so that song, there's a thing called A Way of Life. I think Hans Zimmer wrote it. I'm not sure, but anyway, it's a sound. It's no words to it. A Way of Life, and that soundtrack and the way it flows through, it captures the essence of his journey. Very similar journey, very similar psyche, and similar traumas. And so A Way of Life, one, and there'd be one more. It's going to sound cliche. Eye of the Tiger from Rocky. I love it. Eye of the Tiger, man.
We've heard that a few times over the years. Oh, that's great. Matt, I just want to tell you, man, this was an electrifying conversation. Your knowledge base and understanding of human behavior and how it's influenced by this damn phone. And it's something that really needs to be reckoned with. And I want to thank you so much. And not to mention, your voice is so pleasant to listen to. So thank you for that too.
Oh,
it's great. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys for the time. I enjoyed talking with y'all. Appreciate it.
You're absolutely welcome, man. My friend.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Crackin Backs Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Crackin Backs Podcast. Catch new episodes every Monday. See you next time.